Welcome to another exciting episode of the Agile Matrix Podcast with Tammy. And today we are honored to have a very special guest, Taz Brown. She's an accredited Kanban consultant, an accredited Kanban trainer, a Kanban coach with the Kanban University. So she's really deep in the Kanban method. And in this episode, Taz is going to share with us her incredible journey from being an IT professional all the way to being a Kanban coach, and also share her deep insights of using the Kanban method to foster collaboration, to improve leadership, and then also conduct experimentation and improvement. Now, Taz will also debunk some of these common myths around Kanban. She's going to highlight the importance of empathy in coaching and provide some invaluable advice on how to successfully scale Kanban across organizations. You heard me right? How to scale Kanban. So what can I tell you? If you are an Agile practitioner or just interested in optimizing your team's flow, this episode is packed with actionable insights and real-world stories that will help you guide you on your Agile journey. So before we dive into this conversation with Taz, don't forget to share this episode with your friends, with your colleagues, with people in your community. Let them understand. Just share the link with them, right? And anyone that you know that could benefit from this powerful conversation around the Kanban method and how you can scale it. Let's get started this conversation with Taz. Thank you very much and welcome again to the Agile Matrix Podcast with Tammy. Welcome again to the Agile Matrix Podcast. I'm here with Taz, like I said in the intro. So Taz, tell us about yourself. Introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi. Thank you, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to be on your podcast. My name is Taz Brown. I am an enterprise coach as well as a Kanban coach, trainer, consultant. With Cisco Systems currently. I've been with Cisco for about 4 years, but I've been a practitioner for over 15 years. I started out in IT as a help desk person, then went into systems administration and then Linux engineering. And then ideally I wanted to be more on the people side, which is another system, right? Just a different type of system.
True.
And so based on that, I started out as a Scrum Master, and then eventually moved to a senior Scrum Master role, and then eventually Agile coach. So now I've been doing that, been in a coach's role for about 10 years now, and have been last. And now I get the opportunity again to bring some agility to Cisco, and that's where we are right now.
Wow, that's fantastic. So now you mentioned that you, from where you started as systems admin, then Scrum Master. So in that journey, how did you get introduced to Kanban? How did Kanban come on your horizon?
Kanban probably came on my horizon maybe about 6 years ago or so. I just wanted to explore different ways of, doing certain things, whether that's software development or whether that's operations or DevOps or program management or just general engineering. I wanted to understand what was out there, what opportunities to explore, discover, other ways of working that I could share with my organization. And this is prior to Cisco. I worked at companies like Red Hat and also companies like Nestle, MasterCard, those type of companies. And mostly it's where you're in these really complex environments, right? And you're trying to create an opportunity or find opportunities to invoke change. And so for me, I realized again that I wanted to really work with people and help them reach their potential and reach a higher level of performance. And so it's with Kanban. I decided after sort of watching some videos, out there in the world where everybody goes to learn many things these days.
True.
Yeah. Obviously, this was about 6 years ago, so it's obviously evolved even. It's at a high, it's quite different from even 6 years ago. But I just looking up Kanban, looking up different things around agile, agility, team performance, conflict resolution, managing work, and just basically I saw Kanban and I started learning more about Kanban, reading different books by David J. Anderson and squirrels and all the onion dropping, right? Yeah, exactly. I have many books that I do some of them. I don't know how, but anyway, after that, I said, you know what, let's start exploring what's possible. And I started having conversations with leadership and with, so again, at the higher level where the sustainability is greatest, where you leverage, they're the ones that you have to leverage in order to create the change, or at least explore, experiment, right, with change. That's how I see change as an experiment, right? An exploration. Because you don't know what you're going to necessarily learn. You can apply a hypothesis, and then you've got to test that hypothesis. And if if it's success, great. If it's not, then you experiment.
You pivot.
Process, right? So for me, that's where I said, started asking questions about what were the challenges and the successes of using what they were currently using. And obviously, everybody was mostly using Scrum, but it wasn't necessary that Scrum was the right path for them.
Okay.
So I started asking powerful questions like we do as coaches, and discuss, getting into their heads and understanding really what at the end of all of this, right? What do they hope to achieve in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, in terms of the business, in terms of the self-development. And so through learning, I was able to explore with them, right? It's co-creation, co-partnering with them to say, okay, why don't we want to experiment? Yeah, let's take maybe a 2-month experiment or a 3-month experiment.
Nice.
And let's talk about how we can optimize the work that you do. And so through those discussions, that's where we learn that what they are most proud of, and then what they are challenged with. And so I started to, again, understand those things, figure out what their greatest constraints are, and just say, again, what if we did this? Okay, we apply. What if we did this? What would you hope the outcome would be? Those types of questions where I was guiding, right, but I wasn't giving them the answers. And if it worked today, great, we continue and to expect and adapt. But also we continue to understand from an evolutionary point of view how we can change things, but not through change, but through evolutionary change. And that's sort of I felt like it resonated the most with me, is that a lot of, when we think about organizations, many times we think about just all the problems to solve, but we don't we get to remember that the company has had success or they wouldn't be here. So we start with what are the things they're most proud of, and then we discover, okay, where do they want to go now? And so through those, I was able to bring in Kanban, but it was more of a partnership, and I didn't even necessarily use the word Kanban, right? I just said, okay, what if we made your work more visible, right? Feeling overburdened? Are you feeling there's a lot of variability in what you do? What are you overloaded? Are you noticing that maybe time to deliver is much longer and longer? Right? Maybe there's more dependencies that we haven't really effectively dealt with. And what if we were to make all of that visible in one system, right? That is really just a network, really a part of a network of interdependent services. So, and of course, at that time, now I was new to Kanban, getting into Kanban. Now, quickly, now I'm a AKC, as well as AKT, well as I started out as a KCP, which is really where the coaching part came in for me, right? And where understanding sociological identity, the psychological aspects of people and systems, just like we're, this whole podcast, right? We're doing is a system, and we got to figure out how to change the system, but at a more, sort of micro level, that right at a macro level. And so that's part of the effort to create it is by starting Kanban. Back in the day, David Evans would just say, how do you scale? You just keep creating
More Canvas.
more
Yeah,
Kanban.
yeah.
A little bit these days, but yeah, I mean, you got to think about leadership development. All right, you sort of start from the leadership level again, and that's where the sustainability. So over time, people started to see the effort is in the teams and the organization, even in the leadership, the maturity level. I had to assess that, right? Because one of the great things, Kanban coach, is that you get access to what we call KMM, which is a roadmap, if you will. So you work with these systems and systems of systems to visualize the work, manage the flow, establish those specific policies, right?
Yeah.
We want to ensure that we improve collaboratively, we evolve experimentally, and all of this where they are. And that is, I think, the grace you give, right, in Kanban. I call it grace. We don't come in thinking we have the answers, right? Or it's perfect. They need to be fixed. We start from exactly where they are. We don't change titles or any of that, right? We just start doing Kanban, and we start and live the system, right? Because it's a living, to me, it's a living system that you have to interact every day in order to keep it alive, if you will. And so you get them to understand what continuous flow is. And it's very sort of similar, right, to using value stream identification and mapping, right? But we use something in Kanban called static, which is to introducing Kanban. It's a way to assess the sources of dissatisfaction from an internal perspective. Ideally, you want to create a motivation for change, right? And you want to get them, how do we bring value to our customer and delight them and continue to have them want to work with us because of the amazing value they get from that relationship, right? So that's that workshop, and that workshop can vary, right? Because you have to adapt to the organization and what they can and they cannot do, and you don't try to overload the system, because if you do, they're just going to end up potentially resisting. I don't like that word necessarily, but because I get early thinking and say, well, what's the opposite of resistance? Fear, maybe trepidation, maybe. There's lots of reasons why people might. So that's why I guess I have to come up with a different word. But they may be challenged, right, by the potentiality of something new that they may not be or know how to do, and so maybe because again they identify with often their roles, their titles. They see it sometimes as you trying to change them, and so you have to walk, right? You have to walk lightly as you are trying to do these things, and almost to the extent of, if you remember Gray Squirrel, Red Squirrel, the idea that change happens and you don't even really realize that there's been an evolution. It just happens. By using these Kanban practices, thinking about using the Kanban maturity model, evolutionary change, management, and all of a sudden there's change. But it's minutely they become aware that they're changed.
Yeah, that it changed.
So that's where I started loving, just having an amazing love for not just Kanban, but evolutionary change, and just what you can do just by, using 6 core practices and 4 foundation principles, and there are actually values, right, in Kanban, and debunking the myths of Kanban. That's been a great interest for me, because until you can debunk some of these myths, you're going to have, unfortunately, people out there, saying Kanban is this, right? Not really. Kanban, right, is almost like a wrapper that you put around what is your current system in order to optimize potentially. Reducing waste, right? Using lean thinking, right? Understand again where your value add and your non-value add is, but also visualizing your actual system or modeling your actual
The
and
actual system, not the system you wished it was, but the actual system. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and honestly, they often sometimes don't even get that right. It's like it doesn't resonate. You're in a because we've been doing like current state with Cisco now. We've
mm,
been doing dojos, Kanban dojos, if you will, because we want to
okay,
accelerate. We want to reach more people faster using Kanban implementations, and we bring in 2 to 4 teams at once. We start off with just the basics of agility, and then we move
yeah,
into Kanban and and all of the different elements of Kanban, and
oh
the basics.
wow,
And then we of course go through static
yeah,
workshop, and they come out right. They come out with their current iteration or current design, what we call
mm-hmm.
Kanban, of again their workflow, and then the idea is to get started, right, and just start using the system, and
Yeah,
what will be. You give it time for them to adjust right to it because it can be challenging. Kanban
yeah,
requires discipline that many people don't realize,
mm.
and so I get sometimes the frustration even with a Kanban coach who's trained in it, right? There's still a need for them to understand the discipline that's required and
Yeah,
be willing and open. I'll say willing, but maybe open as well, or to just experiment, try new things, and discover different concepts that might work, for you, right? If you want to understand
mm,
what things are you taking on, and what
yeah,
what sort of cost of delay potentially that particular work or value unit of value is in the system. You might use a class of service like an expedite or a standard class or
yeah,
a
yeah,
class
or
to
a intangible and the rest. Yeah,
intangible what work. And again, you can really customize it and call it whatever you want to call it, as long as there's a
mm-hmm.
shared understanding of what they mean when those work items are in the system and how you treat them. And that's
Yeah,
the part that the engineers and the developers take on. It's like a way to be autonomous
yeah,
because the system Kanban and there's a pull system, not a push. So we don't
mm.
project managers and program managers and Scrum practitioners and even coaches pushing work down
Onto the
the
team. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
stream. They pull it in, and it's based on
mm.
capacity and demand, and we have to understand Little's law and different things like that, right? And using these different things again, not trying to boil the ocean, not trying to overwhelm them because
Mm.
with right maybe what we call maturity level 0, and
Zero.
then
Yeah,
one, but it's always an evolution.
yeah,
um
exactly.
yeah, it's not going to happen and like I said, in a very dramatic way. It really should be happening in the least dramatic way, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
they don't
true.
realize that they're even doing it, but they do
Mm.
different feedback mechanisms that we might use, like a team Kanban meeting or a replenishment or a service delivery review, right? We try to, again, put find opportunities, right? Not to create additional meetings, to create additional constraints, but we try
Yeah,
to find within what they currently do,
yeah, to upgrade them with these ideas.
right? Or,
Mm.
hey, let's bring in maybe something like, okay, a mechan or a cadence to how we discover or determine what work we're ready to work on
Yeah,
next, and we refine those, and then we move them to next or next to start or ready to pull, and then that's the signal, right? The signal is the capacity, right? The lack where in the system is there opportunity to pull in work. That's
to put in
where
work. Mm.
on, right? So yeah, that's what I've been doing with Cisco for I've been at Cisco for almost 4 years, and I started with DevOps, and it's
Mm.
outside of Cisco. I'm doing it like, hey, I'm pointing like it's there right there behind me. Um, but
Yeah.
I I again ask them to if they're willing to be explorative, and let's run
Yeah.
an. I think that's the when they think about it as an experiment, I think they're, at least from what I experience, it's less that, oh, we must do this, and at the end of the we are, it has to, demand, we demand that, this be done, but they are in a process of exploring whether this is something that might
That will
work
work
through
for
it.
them.
Right. So we
Yeah.
always look at it as a experiment. And that's why I love that whole practice of evolving experimentally.
Yeah.
That's really the only way to evolve is through experimentation.
Experiment. Yeah.
What is an experiment?
Yeah. I think, and thank you for that. You dropped a lot of nuggets in those statements. I think one thing that really amazed me that I want people to get really clearly is you talk about introducing Kanban and not implementing it. You talked about the fact that it's a collaborative thing. So we've gained the agreement to experiment on the way we currently work. And we're going to try a couple of things to see what gives us the big bang for our buck. So it's pretty much experimental, iterative, and like you rightly said, we're looking at evolution as opposed to like what I always tell people: there's revolution, there's evolution. We know what happened in revolution: people die. In
Mm-hmm.
evolution, people change without even knowing they're being changed. You know, like you said about the red squirrel, the gray squirrel.
Yeah.
In science, you hear about the tailbone that human beings have a tailbone and it's reduced. It's not just a coccyx, but we've evolved, and that really is the best way to bring change to people. Because, like I always tell people, sorry for going on long, but I always tell people something that when you work with, well, as an agile coach, when you work with a lot of organizations, you realize some people view agile as what has been done to them. In other words, it's been passed down from management and like, you go do this. But when you have a participatory way, they're able to design their own experiments. And what also means that they also are able to take ownership of their experiment, because they will design it with you. They will design their workflow with you. They will talk about the satisfaction. They will look at what's working, what's not working well. And they put their hands to the plow and design it with you. So it makes it so much easier to do. But thank you for that. But one thing I want to ask the question is, in the evolutionary, I'm dancing now, in the evolutionary journey with your teams,
Yeah.
what kind of challenges have you faced?
Wow. Great question.
Mm.
They're plentiful, right? When you're dealing with complex adaptive systems, that's just a beast. It's going to be chaos, a little bit of chaos, a little bit of disruption, a little bit of uncertainty, right? Because that's,
Yeah.
again, think about the VUCA. Have you ever heard of VUCA, which is right, uncertain, and we go through what, chaos, and then ambiguity.
Ambiguity, yeah.
Can't speak to this morning.
Ambiguity, yeah.
VUCA, right? That's
Yeah.
why for the purpose of your audience, I wanted to explain what it is.
Okay. Yeah.
They have VUCA. But we live in a VUCA world, and everything in this world, all these systems, is part of this VUCA world. And so I know that I'm going to face challenges. I'm going to face a sense of fear, trepidation, but empathy wins every time in terms of being able to be self-regulated and self-aware. Where you as a coach, that's just as important as what they get out of it, right? Because if you regulate yourself, because there's going to be resistance or people who are frustrated, right? Changes can be frustrating, but there's also on the other side there's satisfaction.
Yeah.
So if we learn to balance both of those in the same system, again, polarity, and these are inner opposite poles, we can still be, how do you say it? We can still be evolutionary.
Yeah.
But again, don't expect it to happen, in 24 hours. Don't expect it to even happen maybe in 6 months or a year, right? It's a destination, excuse me. It is just an ongoing part of the world, part of the way Cisco does things, part of the way the amazing teams at Cisco do things, right? The project managers, the program managers, the service delivery leaders, right? They are all working hard to deliver value to our customers. And part of being, again, in this complex world is just recognizing that there's going to be dissatisfaction. Well, let's say there's going to be frustration, but there's also going to be satisfaction. So you just have to understand that those are balance. It's a balancing act. And so how I deal with that is I try to be communicative, open, collaborative. I have coaching office hours. Extra
Okay.
I want them to understand, like maybe somebody who's a little bit less, how do you say it, extroverted. Maybe they're more introverted. They might
Yeah.
come in, if they come in once and never come again, but they got something out of it, great. And so we continue
Okay.
to replicate the dojo, right? But we don't replicate the teams. Their experiences are different. Their
Yeah.
workflow
True.
is different, or their workflow is similar. They might be dealing with shared services. So we got shared
Yeah.
engineering. How do we get our system to help us effectively handle that? Maybe we have one unified system so that the engineers are, all part of that one system, working within that one system without having
Yeah.
to. Maybe they come together, right, in the same feedback mechanism. Maybe we bring in, some of the interdependent services that are in the
Yeah.
system, and we invite a delegate to come in and help us with planning,
Okay.
so that we can understand where their constraints are, so
Yeah.
that and again, that's where empathy comes in, right? And hey, they're just as maybe overburdened, if not more, than we are. So how do we get together and figure out a way forward that can help both parties, because we're all part of the same, again, network of
Organization and yeah.
and so we need to work together, not work against each other.
Each other. Yeah.
It's just day by day evolution, right? Something we try to do, it might not take two, and they might say, okay, well, I'm frustrated, and that's possible. So then I bring in, okay, so what does frustration look like to you?
Yeah.
And then I start asking these open-ended questions to explore, again, maybe an area that they haven't explored, which is their own self-regulation, their own self-awareness about how they're responding, and how could they maybe respond in maybe another way, not that it's the best way, but maybe a different way.
A different way to get different response. Yeah.
Even if they're not 100% satisfied with everything, because we're never going to be 100% necessarily satisfied. Maybe they're 90%, maybe they're 85%, and maybe that's good enough, right?
Yeah.
So what's next? What's the next experiment? It's like metrics and measurement. That's a new thing for many teams. Some teams have never made anything, and then you bring it, and they're a little bit daunted by it. For instance, if you bring in actionable agile, or you might bring in Nave or one of these tools, right? It's a requirement of upskilling knowledge, right? So that can be daunting, and that can be scary for people.
Yeah.
And what I try to emphasize is everything is just a learning opportunity, right? I love the whole expression of I learn, right? I never fail. I just learn. Either I succeed or I learn. And I love that quote from Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
And that's the way I always think about things. I also come from a place of storytelling, offering synchronous learning along with asynchronous learning. We have to be very adaptable coaches. We just don't. They may not get access to us as much as we want them to, because maybe we have multiple engagements going on at once. So trying to that landscape, right, can be very challenging and daunting. So I try to implement asynchronous and synchronous, teaching, facilitation. I listen. I create backlogs of where I'm seeing as a coach opportunities, right, to bring in different concepts like polarities, like understand the theory of constraints by Ilaru
Goldratt. Yeah.
I can never pronounce his first name. That's what I'll say, Mr. Goldratt.
Yeah.
And videos, I use Miro. I use a lot of different techniques, right, to help with teaching, with facilitating, with coaching, with mentoring, and all that I do. But ideally, we're co-creating and co-partnering in this.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you for that. That's really powerful. I think when you're saying there's something that when you talk about measurements, I wrote something here. I was like, what you can't see or what you don't measure, you can optimize.
Exactly.
So yeah. And then one thing that I could see. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. It's your floor. Come on.
thinking like there's lots of different, like concepts and lots of different um, practices, but ideally the behavior, the culture, right, outcomes, because you get, I think the more nimble, the more I'm sorry, they were flexible, potentially, but I like adaptive.
Yeah.
That the organization is, the system is, right. I think you're going to see where there's those opportunities for change. There's always going to be boulders, and you just have to figure out how to navigate or navigate through those, and around
Yeah.
those boulders. But for me, Kanban or the implementation or introduction to Kanban really requires leadership support and leadership
Yeah.
learning, right? Leadership agility does not happen in a vacuum. Leadership agility has their own learning, their own self-awareness, their own self-regulation, in order to help their organization, help their teams reach that whatever that level of excellence they seek. They have to be a beacon for change, a catalyst, a synergist, a co-creator. Because without those leadership, I don't know what you want to call them, leadership styles, leadership characteristics, right? There are certain things that may not be achieved, and then you have to ask yourself, within that organization, even before you get into the actual implementation or introducing Kanban, where are they in their maturity level, right? So obviously, understanding the organization's maturity level, right? Understanding, are they, because there's about 7, right, different maturity levels. Maturity models. So you start to ask, what are they currently doing? And are leaders more, are they acting in a heroic way? Are leaders more revolutionary than evolutionary, if you will? Because are they, when you think about social capital, where are they? Are they liberal? Are they conservative? Not from a political standpoint, but again, from a social standpoint. The social cohesion, is it tight? Is it loose? If you can understand some of that and set some of that as a Kanban coach at the very beginning, it'll help you pave the way for maybe a optimum path forward for that organization and for the teams that are using.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. So now you mentioned something. I know I have a couple of questions here, but there's something you said that I want to actually touch. So you see, a lot of times when they call us agile coaches and they bring us into organizations, a lot of leadership bring on in and they go, thanks for coming in. Can you go make them agile? So they're not in the equation. How were you able to bring leadership, or in your situation, were they already bought into the idea? In other words, saying, oh, Taz, come and make all of us agile. Or did they call you in the same way and say, make them agile? And you're able to turn it around to say, hey, you are meant to be in this conversation as well. So if that was the case, how did you do that?
Great question. Again, you have to, this is, as a coach coming into an engagement, I want to understand the organization. So I use my artifacts, certain things, right? One of them being a coaching alliance. So not only are we talking about their expectations, but we're talking about the coach's expectations as well. And part of the expectation is that leadership provides the support, because again, coaches don't have necessarily authority, right? We don't manage, right? And that's something that we have to make sure, and that's why we have to make sure there's support, because we come in almost like even though we come in and see it as a partnership and as a way to co-create, some folks may take it and think differently and say, we're coming in to tell them what to do, how to do it. But a certain level of knowledge that hopefully, if we come together along with their existing knowledge, right? Because we assume and we know that they know what they're doing, right? So we're not coming in to fix them. We're trying to, where in the system might there be opportunities to optimize? And so I always, in my coaching alliance, that's the greatest, that's the number one expectation, is leadership has to be the lever for change.
No, that's fantastic.
You have to set the tone. You have to be the example. Without you being the example, how far do you think we'll get? Probably, and they'll say usually not very far. And how do we sustain the change? Teams don't have
Mm,
power.
yeah.
And so agility, just like Klaus Leopold often says, and even in his book, right? And it agile teams have nothing to do with business agility because they don't have the positional power. And he talks about his flight levels, right? And talks
Mm,
about the level 3, which is the strategic level. And really, that's where all of this should be, all of the change, all of this should really reside. And then
yeah.
at level
And then
2, you're
trickle
talking about
down.
action, right? And agile interactions. And then
Mm,
down execution or operative level, which is we're taking those fight levels, those units of value, and we're executing on them to deliver exactly what the customer expects each and every time.
mm,
And we learn how to adapt and pivot and understand when we might need to engage with the customer in order to suggest, make recommendations, make suggestions about how they can think about their business based on what is now going on in the world today. We have to have
yeah.
a greater understanding than just what is in our team. We have
Mm,
to we have to go so much more broadly. And so
yeah.
leadership is the catalyst. Leadership, right, is the synergist and the co-creator. They need to typically that's where agility resides, is with the leadership.
Mm,
And that's the way I go in. And if I go in like that, and typically it works out 9 times out of 10. It works really well
yeah,
because
that's
we
good.
establish this, and then when we socialize the alliance,
Yeah.
right? We ask for feedback on the alliance, right? Because remember, the teams are part of the alliance. They
Yeah.
may not be in the alliance discussion per se. When you're creating this alliance with the coach, I mean with the
With
leader,
the leadership. Yeah. Yeah.
they are being considered the whole time in terms,
Mm,
definitely in terms of micro expectation, which is we need to explain the why, and it needs to come from you, and then I'll be there with you, and then we look like we're a team, so we'll act as if even if we're not, we will act as we are a team
yeah.
coming in,
Yeah.
and we want to hopefully get them to partner with us as well in
Yeah.
this endeavor. So I
Yeah.
think if we can, and again, it sometimes 9 times out of 10 it works. There's always that outlier, right?
Yeah. Yeah. True. True.
Because we talk about fat tails, thin tail, lead time
Yeah.
distribution,
Yeah.
outliers all over again, then we're not less predictable, and we
Yeah.
definitely are fat tailed, not thin tailed. So a little concept idea in there as
Yeah.
a coach. But
Oh
yeah,
wow. Wow.
yeah, that's how I
Mm,
that's how I go about it. It's an alliance, and I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a working agreement, but an alliance. We form an alliance.
Mm. Well, that's
So
that's
that's
fantastic. Yeah.
the most part. And of course, I adapt to
Mm.
I adapt just like we all have to adapt
Yeah.
to the audience, right? You might have leaders that are a little bit different in their leadership style, right? That may be less agility. How do you say it? I'm trying to think of the word.
More traditional ways of leadership as opposed to yeah.
And so you have to figure out then how still to create an alliance with them that will hopefully
Mm.
lead to an evolution.
Mm. 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 So I'm hearing adaptability, contextual application of your knowledge and what you know based on because you're working with a living client, right? A living system. So you can't just come in. You can't come in with a list and go deploy, deploy, deploy. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's not going to
So
work.
that's
No.
the mindset, right? The
Yeah.
the ability to create a culture that
Mm.
will create the outcomes that you
Yeah.
seek. And
Mm.
that requires change because change is constant.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
those are organizations that are going to continue to survive with
Yeah. Yeah.
people that have a growth mindset. And then they're going to be, or they're going to end up being a Kodak or a Blockbuster or all these other companies that don't currently
Don't
exist.
exist anymore. Yeah, yeah. There's something that you mentioned, and I've said to a lot of people in the past, in different, maybe in the Kanban courses and all that. Then when we look at KMM, we look at three things, right? We look at culture, practices, outcomes. We want the outcomes, but what KMM teaches us is the right practice adoption that creates the culture that gives us the outcomes. But a lot of times people look at the so basically like I was telling someone yesterday that as a scrum master, as a coach, as a Kanban coach, what you are really doing is culture hacking by giving them the right practices to adopt. So you introduce the right practices, they take it on board, and they
Based on where they
practice
are.
long enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Based on
yeah,
where they
yeah.
are.
Mm-hmm.
Like
No,
I
that's
said, we don't.
fantastic.
We're not going to give them. We're not going to give them practices that are. They may be subsets, right? So while you
Mm,
may be doing, let's say you might be doing a maturity level 4 practice or a maturity level 5 practice, doesn't mean that you are at that maturity
at
level
that level, yeah, you can have some transitory parts. Yeah.
or a 1 or a 2,
Mm,
and yeah, and still be at a certain level. But again, that's about testing the waters using consolidated practices and transitional practices together.
yeah. Mm.
Again, iterate and to evolutionize the way that you do the work, do business with your company.
Mm. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. Now, you mentioned, we joked about it about scaling Kanban. So let's just make something clear to all the listeners. So, Taz, in your experience, does Kanban scale? Because some people
Wow,
assume that Kanban doesn't scale. So people say, oh, there's Scale Agile framework, there's the Nexus and Nexus Plus, there's less, there's Scrum at scale. Kanban is only for a team. Does it scale?
absolutely, it does.
Yes.
If you
so
think about
so for our
the
listeners,
steps,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
and each
Hmm.
time then you're working with, let's say, a particular service or area
Mm,
unit,
mm,
and now in order to get your work done, you have to send your work back up to this work for this
yeah, yeah.
unit or business or department, and you can't continue on until they complete their part and they send it back. So it's really about looking at it from the height, width, depth perspective, and leadership. Right, has to be there to
Mm,
help reduce some of the entropy that allows for the entry of these types of practices. And again, you can apply it over Scrum. You can apply it to whatever you're doing. So
mm,
of course, Kanban scales, and it's Kanban focuses on the work, not the workers, because
yeah,
we say, but doesn't mean that Kanban doesn't care about people
yeah.
because are the ones that are doing the work. We're not,
Hmm, hmm.
create that much ignorance, right, of the reality of the
Yeah, yeah.
we live in. It just says that we're going to focus on what we know is going to best serve that organization, that team, which is to focus on the work,
Yeah.
so that you can figure out where in their work are they seeing process inefficiencies, and so they can
Mm,
be able to visualize it. You can remove it. You
yeah.
can have a blocker. You don't just sit there and look at the blocker. You actually attempt to
Act on
remove
it.
the
Yeah. Hmm.
act on it. You pounce on it. You get out the way because you still have work that needs to flow.
Yeah.
And so you get rid of it, the quicker and smoother your flow will be. So
Mm,
your full, the flow. And that's one of the things, the hardest thing is, managing flow for many new people like project managers and engineers that have never done Kanban. They really quickly realize that there's discipline and Kanban is not just a board. Please
yes.
remember, Kanban is not just a
It's
board.
not. It's not this.
Literally, it's not. You have
Mm,
to understand it takes a little bit of drive, it takes a little bit of tenacity, grit to take
mm.
on and really try to understand the ins and outs. Because if you do, there's a lot of potential success on the other side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And see, for our listeners, for avoidance of doubt, Kanban scales. In fact, it scales organically,
Yes,
naturally, and like Taz rightly said, you look at your organization as a network of services. So once you introduce Kanban into one, the smart thing is that you know that what we're after is for it to go from end to end, for the
Yes.
quickest flow of value from end to end. So the smart thing is clear the runway. You put Kanban there, introduce Kanban there, introduce Kanban there until the whole runway is optimized. And what happens from ideation to customer delivered is quicker than ever because Kanban will tune it up all the way. And that's what
Value
we're all
creation
about.
to
Yeah.
value.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we are saying here, look, listen to Taz, listen to me, Kanban scales. I want to get that out because like I said, I talk to a lot of people and you hear about scale agile framework and the rest, and people always assume that Kanban is just localized to the team, but it scales naturally, superbly. In fact, I was telling someone that I think we should write more papers about Kanban at scale. So now,
I,
speaking of writing papers, so go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I would agree because if you think about some of the work David Anderson has been doing, and I forgot his name, his partner in crime, who wrote the book Fit for Purpose. I,
The guy in Canada, Zegloff, right? Alexi.
yes, yes. Again, we talk about fit for purpose and understanding, right? What is required to continue to delight your customer? What is required to continue to ensure as the world changes, you're able to help your organizations do the same and get have a pulse on what is needed, right, in this journey to business, agility, because we could Kanban looks at it in a pragmatic way, as you know. So we don't it's not predictive, and so I think each and every time there's a introduction of Kanban, but also leadership leading the way in that change, that's when you're going to see Kanban come to life, and that's again because it's all about the network of interdependent services. Everything's connected, and you can again figure out what those connections are. Then Kanban again can scale, and you can bring Kanban to life in other areas as well to help reduce dependencies, manage risks, portfolio management, right? All of these different things. I love the Adora's book, the KPPM book that she wrote about portfolio program management. It's really a good book. I used it quite a bit to help them think about portfolio versus just local optimization, right? And just like flight level in cost level and flight level. So, It scales.
I like that. So now she just mentioned Theodora's book. I'll put the link to Theodora's book in the show notes. So if you're interested in getting that book, you can also click on it. Now,
keep going.
Okay. So one question I have here is this. So now you've gone through the process of helping organizations scale Kanban. Tammy comes to you and goes, Taz, you've done this before. What advice can you give me?
I'm gonna say, wow, this is a good question. It's learn, educate. I think often we see, right, just like you mentioned earlier about Scrum and how we get people taking a CSM class, a 2-day class, and then thinking it can go in and now they're really masters, or I hate that word, but leaders, practitioners of Scrum, and there's so much more to learn that has nothing to do with the framework of Scrum. And so I would say, educate yourself, learn, whether it's through whatever you choose to learn Kanban through. For me, it's Kanban University and the Kanban method, because it just resonates with me the most. Not saying that other entities that are doing Kanban aren't doing it right. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of debunking the myths, right? Yeah. It's about crafting and packaging Kanban in a way that's going to optimize Scrum or whatever you're doing at the time. Whether it's some kind of custom Scrum or some kind of custom scaled framework, or something totally different than even that. Um,
Mm.
really, it's about educating yourself
Yeah.
first. Going through the not just to get the training just to get a cert, because in Kanban University and the training, many trainings that we take to get to KCP, to get to AKC and get to AKT
I can
is
see.
not
Yeah.
for the it's hard work, and so you learn and you keep learning, but that's what you have to do to become not even an expert, right? Because nobody necessarily reaches that, but we get close. And so
Yeah.
for me, I have totally from 6 years ago till now, I'm a totally completely different person, and I've been able to achieve certain things as it relates to Kanban and being a true practitioner of agility and helping organizations be successful, people be successful, and reach their potential and reach their goals is because I am constantly learning. So learn what Kanban really is
Yeah.
first. Educate yourself because there's a lot of information out there. Make sure
Mm.
you're really focusing on the right information to
Yeah.
learn what it means. And you can experiment, don't get me wrong, but don't be experiment to the point of destruction, right? You don't
Mm.
go and it's not a predictive, approach. It's a, again, evolutionary approach.
Yeah.
So that's my advice. Learn, 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 and continue to learn, and then experiment. Everything is an experimentation. And if you approach it that way, you're going to likely see many more people that are willing to
Yeah.
experiment with you. And
Oh,
we can
wow.
run
Hmm.
outcomes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. And one question. So, no, one statement I want to make that you said it, but I want to make it clear to everybody. Now, Kanban can be used for any kind of team. If you are a Scrum team, if you are an HR team, finance team, a group of designers, a cross-functional Scrum team, a functional siloed Scrum team. You can use Kanban for any group of individuals that have a value proposition and have something to deliver.
You
Kanban
can
can optimize any group.
you can
So
be an architectural firm. You can be a construction firm.
exactly, exactly.
Absolutely.
So,
It can happen.
mm-hmm,
Publishing company, um, publishing house, whatever you want to call it. Absolutely, you can use it to optimize any industry with any.
mm, yeah. Okay, so now listen to this podcast. We have Scrum Masters, product owners, delivery leads, and all that, and all that. All people addressing in agility. What word, what phrase of advice would you give them to say, I have you? Just imagine we're in a face-to-face podcast. We're sitting down. There are 10,000 people in the audience, and they said, "Taz, advise us." What will you tell them?
Wow. I would tell them to be open minded, to be
Mm,
unjudgmental, to be courageous and resilient
mm,
because change is inevitable, but change is hard.
mm.
That is my advice.
Okay,
You
thank you
can
for that.
do anything with grit and resilience.
Mm,
Again, being empathetic
yeah.
and yeah,
So you heard that from Taz. Be empathetic and be tenacious at the same time because change takes some
yeah,
effort.
be fearless. It's scary
Mm.
sometimes, right? But be willing to again be be courageous.
Experiment, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Awesome, awesome. Now I have one funny question here. So you're currently Taz, you're an AKT, AKC, flight levels, KCP. I mean,
I
you've
do a
come a
little.
long way.
Yeah, I
You
have come
you have a few things on your under your belt. So
about,
if you had
not
to go back,
about the learning.
yeah, it's all the journey of learning. So if we were to go back 10, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years in a time machine and you met Taz at that point, what will you tell Taz of 20 years ago? What will you tell her today?
I know I don't believe we can use profanity on this podcast.
No, please no.
try to, I'm gonna try to put it in a way that is friendly, podcast friendly. Um,
Okay.
how to not give a you know what. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
And
So
the
in other
thing
words, be bold, yeah?
yeah, be bold because at the time I was younger. I was, traversing the world. I was very a lot less, more sensitive, more worried about what others thought of me. And I say you can't if you worry about that the whole time, you'll never discover your greatness.
Mm,
And so for me, I was able to discover my greatness once I finally said to myself, and it's a constant thing. It's like it sometimes it might creep in, but you
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
get it out of there, right? But
Mm,
ideally, again, self-regulate yourself. Self-regulation,
mm,
awareness. If you optimize those things, you realize when they're upon you, and you know how to escape them. So I say,
mm.
don't give a you know what.
Okay. Okay. Okay, okay, perfect. Thank you for that. I know it just ties into something that I learned some years ago. Someone said something that when you look back in the past, the things you regret are the things you did not do that you could have done. That's always a regret. So
Mm-hmm.
the person was advising that if you have an idea now, try it out. At the worst, you say it didn't work, but you cannot look back and say I didn't try it.
Either I
Yeah.
succeed or I learn.
Oh, I
No
learned
fail.
exactly, exactly. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. I only have um so do I have another question? Let me think. Let me think. Let me think.
Am I
So
sparking
okay,
questions and
okay,
questions?
okay. So I have one question. In your Kanban experience so far, what would you say has been your greatest highlights to go? What okay? What highlight happened that made you go? I've picked the right method for me. What was that thing that confirmed to you that yep, this is it?
The way I'm able to tell the story
Mm,
on Bond in a way that allows it to resonate with those who maybe never even heard of Kanban, or maybe they heard of it, but again, it's a myth
the
most of the
myth.
time.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Debunk those myths because
Mm,
oftentimes they don't have, learned people in their organization that have gone through
mm,
the trials and tribulations of learning and using it. You have to use it. You're going to succeed. You're going to learn.
mm.
That again, I for lack because I don't want to necessarily use the word fail. Either I succeed or we learn.
Oh, I
So
learn.
I
Mm,
think that you can teach others to be just as uh, capable of succeeding, but also learning, creating a
mm.
blameless culture, creating an experimental culture where
Yeah.
people are excited to innovate, excited to ideate, and excited to
Mm,
you're gonna carry forth, and you're gonna be able to achieve the things not only you want to achieve personally and professionally, but achieve the things that the organization requires of you, and
mm.
in a much more maximized or optimal.
Optimal.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Thank you very much for that. Now, Taz, I'm aware that you have your own consultancy. So can you tell us about your consultancy, how our listeners can get in touch with you if they need your services, and
Oh,
what you do?
absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about it. Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing this for, like I said, over 15 years. I've been in the IT space. I've been in the manufacturing space. I've been in the retail space. So I've worked with
Mm,
a lot of different industries, finance, and so through all of this, I decided that I wanted to go about and try my own hand at running my own consultancy. And so my consultancy is Adapt X Innovations. I am the
okay.
founder and CEO. Probably consider me the CTO as well, and everything in between. But ideally, ideally, I offer consulting services around, organizational agility, transformation, change management, Kanban, um, large scale, small scale transformations, but also one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and organizational coaching. So for me, if you go to adaptinnovations.net,
Yeah.
you can find my list of services, and also you can reach me at Taz at xinnovations.com.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
We're willing, ready, and able to help you reach your potential.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. In case you didn't catch that, her links, LinkedIn, I'm sure email and everything will be in the show notes as well. So if you need to reach out to Taz, just go straight away. You find it in the show notes. Yeah.
Ready? Come on,
Okay,
come on.
okay, fantastic. So Taz, it's been awesome learning from you and your experiences in Kanban. I've actually learned a lot. Like, I'm showing this, I was taking notes because
Yeah,
see, one thing that I saw that was really, and you said something that was really powerful. You talked about introducing Kanban. A lot of people don't know that static is a very powerful, collaborative framework for introducing change. And you see, there's something that I like that you said also, the realization of the fact that because I always tell people that when people resist change, it's not that they don't like being changed, one, but it's because what you're telling them to leave where they are be most comfortable, to move to
yes,
another place. But when you have that participatory, contributory, collaborative effort towards it, they take the journey with you. And
yes,
people need to understand that you cannot install change like an iOS update. It doesn't work that way. And and you said it so succinctly in all the examples you gave. I could, all I was hearing was, this is the idea. We had a conversation with these people to find out what the problems were and to design something along with them. And it was just the same thing I was saying everywhere. And from what you're saying, I mean, you've scaled it through your organization. That means it worked. It worked from team to team to team. And so to our listeners, that is how you introduce Kanban. You don't install, you collaboratively introduce Kanban to focus because what Taz has said here is that she didn't design a system to go, oh, there you go. It's a system tailored to solve their problems. You see? So when she's having the sessions with them, they are seeing someone presenting solutions. So what do you expect? They will adapt to it, right? No pun intended, they'll adapt, but they will pick it up because it's like I'm hurting here and someone is bringing the bandage. It makes common sense to go, yeah, thanks for that.
yeah,
You know? Yeah.
absolutely. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, it
I
has been for me. I've been looking forward to this for so long. I'm telling you.
happy to represent. Because honestly, I will say, as a African American woman, I love that my journey through, being going through and becoming an AKC, AKT, it wasn't easy.
Mm,
Again, and I would like to obviously see more and more of those that look like myself understand, learn Kanban, and how it can, be so valuable if you
mm,
understand, as the learnings, the different concepts, but also really it's about practical application of something that can be so powerful and
mm.
empowering. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. So you've heard Taz. So Taz, thank you very much for coming to the podcast today. Thank you for sharing your insights, your experience, your vast knowledge. Thank you so much for
And
sharing with our listeners. And like I said, her links, her contacts will be in the show notes. So thank you very much for listening to today's Agile Matrix podcast. And I wish you a fantastic day. Like I always say, take what you've learned, take what you've learned from the Agile Matrix podcast, and use it to win your world today. So thank you very much for joining us today and have a fantastic day. Wow, wow, wow. That wraps up another exciting episode of the Agile Matrix podcast. A huge thank you to Taz for sharing her wealth of knowledge and experience with us today. We hope you gained valuable insights into Kanban, that's into the Kanban method, into leadership, and how to drive meaningful change within your teams. Keep listening for more engaging episodes where we dive deep into the world of Agile, into the world of Kanban and continuous improvement. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Have a fantastic day. Cheers, everyone.